Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Kent. I'm the Director of Education here at the National Atomic Testing Museum. On behalf of our staff and our Board of Trustees, I'd love to welcome you tonight for this celebration, an exploration into the lives and influence of Martha Graham and Erick Hawkins, two titans of modern dance. And this event could not be possible without the tremendous support of UNLV's College of Fine Arts and UNLV's Department of Dance. In fact, we have guests here tonight. Our presenter, Louis Kavouras, is the chair of Department of Dance. Absolutely. And he also has his guest here, Ari Mazik, who is an artist in residence right now. But that's not all. We have our performers this evening, and I'd really like to do a shout out to them. We have, and if you could stand, please, that would be fantastic. Vitelcia, Alexis, Carly, and Selena. There you go. Perfect. We really appreciate everybody being here tonight. This is fantastic. And before we get started, I do want to talk about another event that is coming up. First, tomorrow we have our distinguished lecture with Dr. Victoria Phillips. She's going to be talking about her book, Martha Graham's Cold War, The Dance of American Diplomacy. There is also going to be a President's Concert honoring America's heroes from UNLV. And that's going to be on Thursday, November 18th. A special ceremony honoring local World War II veterans will take place with the younger generation of UNLV rebel vets paying tribute to the men and women of the greatest generation. So those are the events that we have coming up for you. And like I said, I'm so grateful to have you all here. And what I'll do next is introduce Louis, and we'll get this started this evening. So Louis Kavouras has served as chair of the UNLV's Department of Dance since 1994. He's a principal dancer of the Erick Hawkins Company in New York City and is considered a master teacher of this dance technique. In 1998, he was listed by Francis Mason of the World of Dance Review as one of the 10 best soloists in New York City. Kavouras is an archivist for the Erick Hawkins West Institute with the goal of sharing the profound contributions of Erick Hawkins and Lucia Delugachevsky. For this mission, he works closely with the Music and Dance Division of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and the Erick Hawkins Foundation in New York. His dances have been showcased in Australia, Korea, Nova Scotia, England, Guatemala, Jamaica, Turks, and Caicos, and throughout the United States. His artistic works transcend the dance milieu and spill into the visual arts, graphic design, music, theater, film, and philosophy. The arts are his playground. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Mr. Louis Kavouras here, and thank you again for coming this evening.
We always turn these on only when we start speaking because there's all kinds of things that can happen with a live mic if someone goes to the restroom. Yeah. Okay, that's better. Good, now you can hear me. I'm Louis Kavouras. I'm a longtime Hawkins dancer, and tonight's lecture is on. Okay, we'll adjust. Maybe I'll take it off a little bit there. Okay, that's better. So tonight's, I'm a dancer, I know how to adapt. So tonight's lecture is on legacy. And one of the things that you'll realize with these titans is that we become part of their legacies. Yeah, try? Is that better? Oh, much better. Okay, great, great. I want to thank Joe Kent for inviting me. And I also want to thank Diane Zapak. Where's Diane? She's right there. Diane's on the the education board here, and they were talking about the lecture that Victoria is going to do tomorrow. And Diane said, well, I know this guy at UNLV, and he knows quite a bit about Erick Hawkins and Martha Graham. And so this became a kind of wonderful event. You all have to come back tomorrow also. So Joe called the lecture legacy, and legacy is an important word for this. One of the things that I discovered early on about the modern dance, I think it was a thing that attracted me to it also, was that individuals gave you access to a history, and you became, if you wanted to, part of a legacy. And they allowed you, if you wanted to, and if you were talented, if you were passionate, into these kingdoms, into these families. And you also had this responsibility that you realized that you could be someone that carried these legacies forward and transported them to the students. I'm quite excited to have my students here tonight who will be performing some of these kind of classic works. One of the things you're going to see, actually, they performed New Moon, a piece of Erick's from 1989, and we did it right before the pandemic hit. So it was like the last weekend in February. 2 weeks later, everything shut down. We all went home, started dancing on a horrible thing called Zoom. So, and Instagram Live and all kinds of other places. We kept dancing, which was great. I'm also hoping that this lecture gives you a kind of personal glimpse into what it was like to be a modern dancer in these worlds. The relationship between Martha Graham and Erick Hawkins, it's a rather complicated story. And there's even feelings and wounds that are still quite alive today, even though they're gone. The companies and the techniques, the newer generations are kind of finding ways together where they had been very disparate and separate in the past. In the Hawkins world, we used to call them the Graham crackers. That they were this whole other tribe of people. And both sides, Erick was probably never forgiven for his relationship with Martha and for leaving her. Many of us who are connected to the legacies, these individuals are like family members. You know, we're connected to them, sometimes closer in ways than we are connected to some of our biological families. So, and I sometimes tell my students that those eras, it was like church. You found a temple, you found your high priestess, you found your priest. And these are the people you worshiped at their feet. You sat at their feet and you listened to. And you collected the things that they said. And it was an amazing time to be part of this. So my hope tonight is to give you a little bit of an informal touch of that. I brought a lot of materials too to show you and to give you glimpses into their profound lives. At UNLV, we have the Hawkins collection, which is a lot of black boxes. Yeah, here. And there's about 300 of them. There's a few more in New York that still need to come here. But they span all kinds of things. I mean, like these are from Martha Graham's era when Erick was making choreography back then. You know, some of them, we just labeled them the Martha days here. And then they're separated by pieces, and that I brought a few of them to show you tonight. It's quite amazing to open the box because it's a piece of history that tends to come out of that collection. And what I've brought over here is a group of photos, largely 1938, when Hawkins and Graham first encountered one another, all the way to 2000. Some of Hawkins' choreographic notes, which are scans from the Library of Congress, are here. All of Hawkins' papers went to the Library of Congress. Actually, all of this stuff went to the Library of Congress, and eventually it had to find another home from there because the Library of Congress is a paper library. So, and they've done a fantastic job cataloging and making the materials accessible. So there's some notes that you can look at Hawkins' notes here. And I brought some masks over here and even some finials from some of these metal pieces are from a set. I was going to bring the set, but then the set is huge. I realized we did it last week at UNLV, one of the Stephen Acker. It's a Noguchi set. So we did a remake of the Noguchi set at UNLV. And it's about 13 foot tall. It would hit these lights, bringing it into here. But I brought some of the finials there from the reconstructed Noguchi set. And then the best thing is I brought my dancers, some dancers from, 3 of them are alumni who've recently graduated, and V is going to graduate this semester. Bravo. We're also lucky to have Ari Mazik here. Ari Mazik is the artist in residence at UNLV this semester, and Ari was a principal dancer with the Graham company, so he was really steeped in that work, and Octav also was with the Graham company. So it's amazing when you have these sort of wealth of knowledge. So we can hopefully talk a little bit about, show some of the movement, and then talk about even how the Graham movement differs, looking at it also. I also want to acknowledge in the audience Victoria Phillips, who's giving tomorrow's lecture. So it's, without her, we wouldn't be here either, you know, without her lecture. So it's, and I'm fascinated with that topic. And so I'm really looking forward to, and you have to order her book too, Martha Graham in Diplomacy. So, and also Elizabeth Aldridge is here, who is the former curator at the Library of Congress, and she's responsible actually for processing Erick's papers. So made it possible for us to look at them. And if and when you die and you're really important, you have important papers, try to have them in a way that they can go somewhere and be preserved. It becomes, it's a question that comes up, and I've been thinking about it as I've been planning this lecture even, is what is legacy and how do we preserve the legacy of these important documents and pass them on and preserve them. And in dance, we even have a living art form, which we talk, it's just live performance. So some of the things of those days, we didn't have video on our phones the way, they didn't have phones in that way. It was very different what the phone was. So yeah, it's how we preserve it and how we carry it forward. I've collected these photos since I was 20. What I've brought here today is just the Graham and the Hawkins limbs of the tree that I have. There's more photos of other parts of modern dance, and there's more legacies that continue. These are interesting because these intertwined, and Martha's legacy is interesting because so many modern dancers kind of passed through that branch of the tree. The Paul Taylors, the Aileys, the Cunningham. So she was quite amazing in that way. Graham and Hawkins, the photos, Graham and Hawkins together, 1938 to 1950. There's a section where you'll see Erick and Lucia together. Lucia Dugachevsky was a composer, and I always say that Erick was transformed and forged by 3 legacies. One was Balanchine, when he met Balanchine and ballet. And then when he met Martha Graham, that was the second aesthetic fire he was forged in. And the third was Lucia Dugachevsky, who was the composer. And his work transformed at that moment also. So those 3 eras, at the end, there's some company photos. My students always like those because there's younger pictures of me in there. Yeah, so yes, I was younger. There too, and dancing. Also on the wall, we have some original Barbara Morgan, some signed Barbara Morgans. Also, probably the most classic, iconic dance photo of all times is Martha Graham in the kick. There, that big one, and then next to it is Erick and as the penitent in El Penitente, both choreography by Martha. This is Henry Kurth. Down here, I put a couple pictures of some of my teachers who brought of Hawkins. And Henry Kurth was amazing because he knew Martha. He traveled with Martha throughout the 40s and the 50s. He was a lighting designer. He was a scenic designer. And he was like Erick and Lucia and probably Martha. When they taught, they didn't simply teach you how to dance or how to do scenic design. They taught you about the world. They taught you philosophy. They taught you all kinds of things. What happened in that moment was it was a way that the art could be a tool from which to unlock all the secrets of the world. And that was just so profound for me. Henry is a big piece of the puzzle. He's got probably the most beautiful scenic designs I've ever seen. And he's a lesser known person. He was a student of Arch Lauderer's, who designed Letter to the World and many Graham classic choreographies. And his works are now at the McNay Museum in San Antonio, and it's a fine place to go look at both Lauderer's things. I remember as a student once helping Henry go through all of Arch Lauderer's papers and drawings and boxing them up and crating them up so that they could go to the McNay Museum and be preserved. Ari, you'll love this. This is the original set for Diversion of Angels, which often the Graham people say, well, Diversion of Angels doesn't have a set. And I say, well, it did back in the 40s when Henry Kurth designed it. So this was just kind of a beautiful piece with that forced perspective line. And Henry quite liked that piece. Henry also worked with Catherine Karapetes, a couple of my other teachers here. And Henry was responsible for modern dance and Hawkins technique being at Case Western, where I went to school. And I just happened upon it because I went to school there, and I just said, oh, modern dance, that sounds interesting. I didn't know what that was. And then I also met Henry, the work study job. So I sort of fell into all of this stuff, all those black boxes. This was a set that Henry did. This pissed all the other graduate students off because he decided to, he designed a scenic design for me when I was a graduate student. So my MFA thesis had a scenic design by Henry Kurth, who had designed for Martha. And then that's now at the McNay. Catherine Karapetes here. Henry had Catherine bring modern dance and Hawkins technique to Case Western. She was a Graham dancer and a big Mon dancer. And then she brought Kelly Holt, who was Erick Hawkins' first male dancer, who developed the technique. So it was kind of like, again, finding something in the source in Ohio that was just amazing, what they did. Some dates and just some developments, and there are great books on the relationship between these two artists. Mark Franco, who surprisingly, I've been so bad telling people about this event because we've got so many things in the dance department. There's even tech going on right now where they're teching dances over there in the building. So there's some dancers that couldn't make it tonight. I posted something on Facebook that I'm giving a lecture tonight on this, and Mark Franco, who wrote the book, immediately shared it and said, I'm so glad someone's talking about Martha and Erick. And that Mark Franco has a book, Martha Graham in Love and War, and it's about the years when these two were together. He became her first male dancer, and her company hated it when he showed up for kind of obvious reasons. When he came in, Erick was kind of precocious, and he went to Harvard at 16, so he was opinionated. He was really intelligent. So was Martha. I mean, they're incredibly intelligent people. And when they talked, they would talk about all kinds of books, all kinds of philosophers, Jung, Freud, everything was available to them in talking about it. They became involved. He was 15 years younger than her. She quite adored him. I love this photo for that. He would come into the studio, also dance without a shirt. So I think that was impressive to them too. I like to bring this. This is Erick's suitcase. It's got this great little EH. But in 1938, he went on tour with Martha. And he was a poor artist, so he he had all of his things in a brown paper bag. Martha bought him this suitcase, and she bought him a briefcase. And he kept it all along. After he died, Lucia was carrying it, and I said, you've got that suitcase. And she said, yeah, that, and I won't use the word she used about Martha, but she said, yeah, that's the one that she gave him. So anyways, but Lucia didn't carry, Lucia didn't get rid of it either. So obviously it had some kind of symbolic meaning to all of them. The company, I've talked a lot to Stuart Hodes and other members of the company. One of the things, like even when you talk to people, what you realize about their relationship was she brought him in as an equal. And that was a difficult place. And for a lot of the other dancers, he was rather arrogant. He would correct them. He would give them corrections, and he had just gotten to the studio and was just learning the technique. So the dancers in the room were all snickering because they know, like, you don't do that. You got to wait your turn and your time before you can start offering all the corrections. She also produced some of his choreography. This is the Noguchi set. And over here on the table are some of the finials, these shapes that go on the reconstructed set. This we just re-put together at UNLV. I spent all last week painting it. But this is Stuart Hodes. Stuart's 96 now. And that's, here we had Erick. These pieces were panned. They weren't, and they were probably Erick before he was Erick, you know, and he wasn't, they weren't Martha's pieces. So the critics really didn't know what to do with them here. That's the original Noguchi set. Yeah, I'll show that again. But Erick left Martha in 1950. In 1952, he met Lucia Picaczewski. She was a radical experimental composer, a student of Edgar Varese, and she changed it all for him. You know, she was the one that probably saved him and gave him what he needed to become the poet of modern dance that he's considered. Yeah, and so often I like to say that because people sometimes don't give the partner enough credit for what happens. And she's brilliant. Actually, her star is rising. I do think there will be a day where we know her more in the music world than we know him in the dance world. You can see she's playing the inside of the piano, what she called the timbre piano. She liked to create the sounds. She was interested in sound, not melody. I love this picture of her because Erick was rather stoic. She was great fun. He was Apollonian, she was Dionysian. She was great with a cocktail, and she was just fun and spontaneous. I often say she was, you know, for me, she's the original hot mess of an artist. Just, she could frustrate you, but at the same time, she could just transport you with what she knew and what she did. And so I love this photo of her in the 60s. Here she is playing with mallets the inside of the piano. We'll play a little bit of her timbre piano piece. Some of the students will show some movement to it. What she brought to Erick, this is one of the things, how she changed his work. She brought the concept of time to him. And most dancers count things because a lot of music is in 4/4. So dancers will count in 5, 6, 7, 8, you know. And she said to him, you know, Erick, why is everything in 8? And, you know, and he says, well, it makes it easy to organize, and it has a rhythm, it just keeps going. And she says, well, you know, some numbers like 6s or 7s or 3s or 1 are beautiful meters. And so when that happened, his work became this. What most of my students will end up saying about a Hawkins piece when they do it is, oh my God, when you're inside of it, it is a completely different world. It is like being in a tornado, and the outside of it is like this pristine, calm nothingness, just this, how effortlessly and beautiful. And what they did, and this is fascinating too, because he met her in 52. They worked for about 5 years. They did some early pieces. And then for 5 years, they just collaborated and experimented. And that's when he was developing technique. And that's when he was also developing all of these aesthetic theories with her. And in that 5 years, they then produced a piece called Here and Now with Watchers in 1957. It was all about time. Now, in 57, Sputnik happened. The world got fascinated with space. And he was resolute about time is the most important element. And he wanted time because he thought if the dancer was clearly counting each moment and also not getting into this regular rhythm that just, Lisa would call it a rattle trap train. It just keeps going with the same thing. And she would say you quit listening. So all of this variation would keep the world alive in a very unusual way. And she would also do the same thing with sound, that you would get these things, and sometimes silence. If she really liked the movement, she left silence around it, because she didn't want to fight with it. They ultimately thought that music and dance was a marriage. And that one wasn't subservient to the other, one of the forms. They should both be. And sometimes people will talk to dancers about, oh, it's about the music and you're just making movement to the music. And so they were really radically against that. She brought abstraction to him, without a doubt. She was great friends with the abstract expressionists. Robert Motherwell was her close friend. I have 2 Motherwells at home that are signed to Lucia, happy birthday with love. So the abstract expressionists also produced her first concerts in New York. She couldn't bring him Noguchi, but she brought him a man named Ralph D'Orazio, who was a sculptor in New York that she knew very well. And so this is from early floating. We're going to do a little piece of early floating today. V is going to dance part of Erick's solo. Actually, V is going to dance it. It's the first time a woman's ever danced Erick's solo right here tonight at the Atomic Testing Museum. Yes. All right. So Ralph D'Orazio, abstraction. And that they also experimented with sensation. There's something in Hawkins about the sensation of the movement, not the pyrotechnic of the movement. We have a statement in Hawkins: just because you can doesn't mean you should, and so much dance was just about the virtuosity. And he was really looking for something different than that. He also wanted movement that didn't harm the body. And I think when he left Graham, he wanted, Lucia would say that, she would say lovingly, if Erick could dance forever, he would sell me to the devil. And she said that out of a kind of, that it was so endearing that he loved dance that much. That he just wanted to dance and wanted to dance effortlessly. Many consider him the father of somatic techniques, where we don't harm the body, and that the soma and the psyche somehow meet each other, and we don't try to conquer the body. Yeah. He also brought influences from the East, suchness, otherness, into the movement. That's the hawk from Plains Daybreak. In the boxes over there, I brought some of the things. Yeah, the raccoon also. He was from the West, he was from Trinidad, and in his work, he had themes of Native American inspired themes that happen. Yeah, the snakes are over there, the raccoon is over there. Yeah. All right, so now we'll get to this. This will be great, just show some movement. This is Selena and Alexis over there. And Carly is jumping into this role here. So this is New Moon, and like I said, they danced this, and then the pandemic hit, and it was great that we could get this this piece back up before that happens. So I think this is let's just show New Moon. Yeah. This is the opening trio for New Moon. in 1988, Erick had a stroke. It was probably one of the most tragic things for him because this very verbal man suddenly could not speak. And he learned to speak again. And it was always a little harder after that. This piece in '89, the year after, he fought and fought to create this piece. He worked with the dancers. There were about 200, 300 little index cards with movements. And Erick then eventually organized all of the movements and created this beautiful, beautiful piece. So give me a moment just to switch to sound. Here we go. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, that piece, it's kind of just, it's beautiful. And when you it almost makes me weep when I think about Erick at that time and what he was going through. And soon after, he developed prostate cancer, and he died in '94. It was sort of a slow dwindle, and none of us were even told he was sick. We knew something was up, but we didn't know. V. This is Baryshnikov dancing early floating, he danced this in 2003, I believe. Yeah, this is a piece, early floatings from '61. I love early floating because this piece for me is when Hawkins became an abstraction. It's, you know, the work, this is his most abstract work. It's just early floating, no metaphor at all. There's no moon involved. It's just early and it's floating. It's Lucia's music. So you will see, again, this beautiful clarity of movement of Erick, but then Lucia's timbre piano, which is just like a storm of sounds and timbres inside of it. She plays this the inside of the piano. There are hair combs, there are hairpins. She rosins the strings of the piano so she could pull mallets against it so it sounds like whales. There's just it's one person, an orchestra with just one person and sound. So let me get the music. That we heard just a moment of it there, almost like Lucia telling us something from beyond. Come on, where's the cursor? All right, here we go. Two stops. It's also quite fun because when Baryshnikov did the piece, Baryshnikov won't go on stage unless his name is in the costume. Because he cannot, you know, go out there with the wrong costume on by mistake, like pick up somebody else's. So he borrowed the Hawkins costumes. He remade one of them. There's a set, I think you're in one of the remade costumes, one of the new ones, which are Lycra. The original ones, I think I have one over there in a box. They were wool. Lycra was a new fabric that came later. But the wool is actually better because it would light in a beautiful way, like the black was true black on stage. Like the color is just a lighting designer's dream, those wool leotards. But what's great for me is that inside that leotard is MB, that's the Leo that Baryshnikov wore when he danced the piece. Graham and Hawkins movement. We can talk a little bit. I think, let me talk about a couple pieces. I'm going to circle back to just this idea of Graham and Hawkins, and we can kind of have a discussion about what the movement was like. Largely, Erick's movement is about center. Every movement had to start from center and go to the periphery. Like there was no way that the arm just moved. If you moved the arm like an agalathon when you reach up, the center has to move for the arm to follow. So even in New Moon, when they do that first step, it's not the arms that started, it's the center that throws the arms into these tassels for the shape and all of those movements. Those were kind of big events for Erick. And there was a kind of naturalness to the movement. He believed in free flow of motion. And there's a lot of forms that he borrowed from Graham. Some of the exercises we still do use the same forms on the floor and the exercises, but he softened them and adapted them. And so I'll circle back at the end because actually we have some great Graham dancers in the room who can talk more about her movement and that style. I want to just briefly show you this because this is quite exciting for me, what happened last week and has been happening. In 2015, we were in New York. Dory Ashton, who is a famous art critic and art history person, there was a tribute to her. We went there. Dakin Hart from the Noguchi Museum was there speaking. And Catherine Duke and I went up and said, you know, you have two Hawkins sets that Noguchi did, and one of them being Stephen Acrobat here. And we kept this dialogue going with Dakin. In 2017, we went to the museum, and the museum put the sculpture together for us. And Dave Rao from the sculpture department here went, and we measured every bit of it and took 1 million pictures of, and this was reconstructed. And so this is reconstructed. This is last week photos where we made this. I've been painting all last week. It was kind of fun to have to go to school paint. And then we took it out to the desert, and the dancers, Christina Berger, Jeff Leon, danced the piece. And this is a reimagined work of Catherine Duke's. At the Library of Congress, we looked at everything that had reference to Stephen Acrobat. We looked at the scores. We looked for every possible note. And she sort of veered away from some of the dialogue. It was, Erick liked no theater. And so there were some speaking parts of that, and there were some speaking parts to Stephen Acrobat. So she sort of took it into just the realm of motion. What would Erick do with this today? What's the kind of question? So anyway, this was just a fantastic thing. I would like to bring this up about Noguchi because we are at the Atomic Testing Museum, and this is the memorial that Noguchi designed and wanted to be built in Hiroshima after the bomb. It was never executed, but the memorial that is there pays homage to this work, if you look at it. I think it's a little bit of a complicated history, and it could have something. He was torn about it because he was both American and Japanese. his background. What's interesting is this. I found this out not long ago in some research, is this is a bell tower that he designed to be built also at Hiroshima. This was supposed to be 77 feet tall. These objects would move in the wind and make sounds. And he wanted the pipes to be pitched in a way so that when the wind blew on the top of a mountain, this sculpture would resonate and make sound. And what's fascinating to me is Stephen Acrobat, which for Erick, Stephen was from Portrait of the Artist, Stephen Dedalus, and this idea of innocence, this idea of coming of age, becoming an artist. This has such a, we call it the jungle gym. It has such an attribute of play to it. And the fact that it inspired Noguchi to deal with this moment in Hiroshima and to get kind of back to play and childhood as a way of thinking about the horrors of that event. So amazing to me. We'll look at some of these pieces. This is Pine Tree, probably one of my favorite masks of all time. The costume is just sitting right here. I like to bring these things out so people can also, kind of touch them, which is also kind of fun. One of my favorite masks of all time, just the abstraction of this becoming the pine tree. And it's so open, but you see these and you start to feel like a ponderosa pine at that moment. Yeah, and also over here, you'll see that some of the other masks, these are Ralph Durazio. These shapes are all inspired by Navajo sand paintings. The squash head, so all of these are 8 clear places. The squash head is here also. This has had an interesting life because in 2016, Anthea Hamilton, who is a young British contemporary artist, did an entire exhibit. She found a photo of Erick. She didn't know it was Erick, and it was him in the squash head. It's right here. And she created this character for the museum. She had the British fashion designer Lowe design the costumes and the headpieces. And this character lived in the museum in the rotunda, and it was a performance art piece that went on for all summer. And so quite fantastic. And then when they opened the exhibit, somebody of age went there and said, "That's Erick Hawkins piece." And so then the museum contacted the Hawkins Company and wanted to know more about it and to actually credit Hawkins with some of the work. So these 8 clear places, we've got 3 of them reconstructed. These are from 1960. And Lucia said she wanted to reconstruct these pieces before she died. That didn't happen. And what's sad about that is we don't have the music really for it. We only have ideas of music. This is Catherine Duke and I reconstructing. This is 2009 when we did Here and Now with Watchers at UNLV for his centennial celebration. And yeah, here, Jenna. That's Jenna right there, 2009 alumni from UNLV. And when we did that, that was probably a hot mess when we did that piece. And again, it was getting back. But what was astounding to me about that work is in 57, Erick and Lucia had figured who they were out aesthetic. I mean, and he kind of didn't waver after that. I mean, once he found what his voice was, hers somewhat too. They sort of stuck to that. Yeah, the clown from Here and Now with Watchers. It's got a great title. The Clown is Everyone's Ending. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. I'll just finish with this, and then I welcome people to one, ask questions. I'd love to talk a little bit about Graham and Hawkins. We've seen some Hawkins movement, but it'd be nice to talk to the Graham people in the room about how it differs from the the Graham work, and we might be able to entice Ari to even show us a couple little positions and things from Graham too. And then I also welcome people to look into these boxes. It's always a pleasure for me to be able to open the black box and show people what's inside of it. It's kind of a little piece of dance history and a piece of this legacy. Legacy is complicated, and often we talk about it as a simple passing on. What I think is, and what I've realized about it is it requires a kind of sacrifice, and even a sacrifice of the self. And that's what some of these giants and their work required of us, is for ourselves to step aside, to become part of something that was bigger than us. I like showing that to students because there's a thing about that. Joseph Campbell was friends with Henry Kurth. Jean Erdman was a Graham dancer. His wife, he was a mythologist. And he wrote a book called The Hero's Journey. The Hero's Journey is kind of all over Martha's work, Errand into the Maze, the Caves of the Heart, those kinds of things. Campbell also really influenced George Lucas and the Star Wars trilogy. That is just classic Campbell and Hero's Journey. And the thing that Campbell said, and he identified in the Hero's Journey, was that the hero delved into the unknown. And within the unknown, they lost themselves. They lost themselves so that they could better find themselves. And often in the hero's journey, the hero had these efforts to conquer the beast. The beast was the dragon, the beast was the monster, the beast was the dark side, the darkness. And in the efforts to conquer that other thing, the hero often conquered themselves, and they became born new in the new fire. And so for me, primarily, I can speak from Erick's point of view and what he and Lucia did, but Graham is so much a part of the fire that forged him. And so was Balanchine before that. And Lucia then forged him later and transformed him then. And so it's amazing to pass those things on. And I'm also interested, and when I ask questions, that perhaps one of our students would like to also say, like, what it's like to learn these techniques from these people are gone before you guys even were possible. So anyways, any questions? And there's great authorities in this room to answer all kinds of questions about anything in Graham. Yeah, questions, comments, anything.
Louis, what sparked the movement toward modern dance? I mean, for those of us who aren't, I remember Paul Taylor, all those that came from Martha, but what inspired her to move in that direction?
Let me answer, and then I'll have others pop in too, is most of us kind of credit things like Loie Fuller and Isadora Duncan at the turn of the century. Turns of the century are interesting phenomenons because people see it as a new realm. Things change. And Isadora Duncan took her shoes off. She felt the earth. She wanted to dance. Now, for me, what's interesting about Martha and that generation is they developed techniques, really strong techniques. There are Isadora kinds of techniques and principles, but these were such codified techniques that big bodies of work came out of. And that's a very different thing that happens today, because it used to be that if you wanted to dance Hawkins, you discovered that work, then you took the technique, and most of the time that's all you took. And what you tried to do was strip away every other influence and just get us purely into that pure kind of movement. There's something I think amazing about that. Perhaps it's more like what the ballet world had been doing before too, of really getting down to to just that. My generation in the 80s, we snuck off to ballet classes and jazz classes. And I mean, I can remember Catherine Carapice, we'd never tell her, because if we told her we were taking ballet, oh, that's going to make you stiff. But I mean, what are you going to do with all of that? You know, and we don't think those ways anymore. I mean, I want my students in as many classes as they possibly can do. And it doesn't matter which ones. Yeah, yes. And actually others feel free to pop in too, because we've got some really great authorities that's not, you know, in the room, and I'd love to hear.
Since we're sitting in the Southwest, would you mind speaking more to the inspiration that Erick had from the Southwest specifically? And I seem to recall that him and Martha had spent some time in the Southwest together. But with the sand paintings and stuff like that, could you touch a little bit more on?
He really loved it. He talked about how he was born in Trinidad, Colorado, at the intersection of several Native American tribes, and that it really inspired him. He loved to camp. He took Martha camping. I can't imagine Martha camping, but he took her in a car. They drove in the West, and I think they spent a couple weeks out camping.
And that was the beginning.
It's like Michael, my husband always says, well, my idea of camping is like the Four Seasons. Like, I mean, that's what I would think Martha would be too. But he opened that world up a bit for her too, I think. Yeah, yes. Mara. What? She went from camping to starting. There you go. There you go.
Can you speak about, because he, in terms of the West, he was an environmentalist. Before environmentalism was.
I wanted to say that, and yeah.
In many pieces, Aglaton.
A lot of his pieces were, the other thing about his pieces, there's no conflict in his pieces. There is no, Graham, she loved the psychological moment of a character in that moment of decision. And Hawkins, he didn't want conflict in his work. He, you know, and if you asked him about it, he would say, why should we practice that? You know, and I mean, drama is a great thing, but you know, he was such a principled man in that way, and he was an environmentalist. Even when you look at the way the pieces go together, he wanted natural things that occurred in nature, leather, feathers, you know. He didn't want plastic masks and things, you know. So, yeah, that's such a thing with it. The other thing that he also believed in, that it was live theater. He would have hated me turning on a tape. He only ever performed to live music. So you had a living musician creating those sounds in this space at this time with this dancer making those movements, and those things came alive. He also only choreographed to living composers. No Bach, no one, because he wanted the music of today, the music of now. He was very principled. You know, in Hawkins, we don't have rules, we have principles. It's like a church. What's it like you four? Most of you are graduating, so I can't hold you back, but.
Okay. Hello.
Alexis.
I guess.
And all of these are really brilliant choreographers. All four of them take work and make work.
I think it's interesting how you mentioned how there's no conflict.
A little louder.
Hello.
There you go.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that he didn't believe in like a conflict, because I feel like sometimes like learning the movement or doing what we just did, it's like ever breathing. Like there's never like any like stopping point, and even if we're still, it's still like a subtle like growth of like breath. So to me, that's kind of how it feels like learning the movement.
The movement resonates.
Mhm.
You know, he wouldn't stop or halt a movement, so that it subtly keeps alive. One of his favorite philosophers, Susan Langer, talked about living form.
It doesn't matter.
Go ahead,
I'm
Selena.
here. Okay, hi.
Hi. So for me, kind of going off of that too, it's when doing the movement, you don't really, there's no, drama, conflict, like you're not getting into the headspace of a character per se, but it's really about the movement. And so you really have to kind of, I don't know, really embody the movement itself and not so much the idea, the idea of what it presents. It's more about it itself, kind of like going off of that kind of like abstract art and abstract movement.
And Hawkins would say in and of itself for its own sake. We don't need a reason for it. Why is the cherry red? You know, so that's Ari. If you had to put Graham into context a little bit with movement, like as what are the important principles, or how would you talk about?
I think I would say that, for one, Martha was very visceral, and she always believed in wearing a mask for her face, so she would never think of emotion and try to act it out. She always believed that you would move in such a way that it gave you back anger or joy or angst or whatever the emotion was supposed to be. And with that, she would always say that there's such a fatigue in the body that even in its sleep, it cries. So it was super physical. And yeah, sorry, it's just a little emotional talking about Pearl and Martha. And I never met Martha. I came to the school 2 years after she died, but I had Pearl Lang, who was the first woman ever to do Martha's roles, and she became my grandmother in the end. She took me under her wings when I was 13, trained me, and I feel like I know Martha through Pearl, and I teach and dance, try to keep Pearl alive. And she always said what Martha wanted, what she didn't want, what Martha would never do. So there was never any ego about Pearl's teaching. She would never say, I don't like it this way. It was always, well, Martha did it this way, so we have to do it this way. So I just feel like I got to know Martha through Pearl. And with all the other teachers that were teaching at that day, in that time back in the 90s. But yeah, so Martha just believed in, like Hawkins, and I guess he took that from Martha, about moving from the center. Her technique is based off contraction and release, which starts in the pelvis. And even the arm movement comes actually from the back, like as if you had wings. It was never just an arm. But you would also take the energy from the ground up. So you would feel it through your feet into the spine, and then your arms would move. So you would always grow 10 inches after each class. That's your metaphor. Even the contraction, it would never sink. It actually engaged and grew, and you got taller and taller. So your spine actually just stretched completely all the time. And with that kind of energy of always lifting and always moving physically without trying to think of something, it made you super strong, and it made it real and honest. And to go back to your question, Martha came from Route St. Denis and Ted Denishon. And she also just hated ballet. She was tired of the prettiness and the flowers and the tutus and the fluff. She was like, I want something real, and I want to be something dramatic. So she took off the shoes as well. And she said, I'm going to stand on the ground barefoot, and I'm going to face emotion and darkness in the eye, and I'm going to present it to the audience. And that's where her work started. She never had a technique, which I think is genius. She was a choreographer. And from her work, someone once said to her, well, you might need to train dancers eventually, so you might want to have a technique. So she dissected her repertoire to make a technique, and started with, well, what does the body need to do in the morning. Okay, so you have to stretch your spine out, you have to bounce, you have to breathe. And she started her technique with that, what the body needs to do from beginning to the end, and taking her work, nature, and making a technique. So when you see the rep or the technique, you can see the marriage between everything because it actually came from the rep. So like when I teach, I always say what you do on the floor is what you do in the air, because you really have to be doing it in the air because that's where it came from. So yeah, she was.
Hawkins is very similar, the same kind of ideas that it all connects together. The first exercise to the very last. It's wonderful.
Any question? Yes. The drama, the angst. It was part of her vocabulary. She created the work around that, so she wanted to keep diving on that. But at the same time, it's what the body does on its own. Like the spiral, the contraction, the release, your body does it naturally every day without thinking about it. And she wanted to stylize it and control it. So when you walk down the street, you walk in the spiral, but therefore she's like, I'm gonna exaggerate it and control it. Same thing with the contraction. If you cough or if you sneeze or you get scared and you move, there's a contraction. That's what your body does naturally all the time, all day long. So she just wanted to exaggerate that.
And some of the most powerful muscles in the body are just deep in that pelvis. And both of them knew that. Hawkins, when he left Graham, started to go to the Ida Rolfs in New York and the Andre Bernards to look for more information about what was going on in there. What were the muscles? And that's another big piece of that technique. Yeah, Vicky.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm basically a jazz instructor, but I took classes from Ethel Butler. She was
Graham.
Yes.
And one thing that she said to me was that Graham felt that everything we were born, everything happened from here.
Yeah.
From the womb. And so therefore all movement should come from that area.
Yeah, and with that, it actually gives you more strength
Primal.
because it will take your weight out of your legs, the contraction, and lift you out. So you will actually protect your knees, your lower back, and everything that goes into your hamstrings by doing it that way. Versus the Horton technique, which would actually put the weight into your knees and into your lower back.
Oh, yeah, we can pass the microphone. That would be great. This is Victoria Phillips, who's speaking tomorrow. We all have to come back. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank the dancers because you all were just beautiful. And it's been so long since I've seen live dance. I was a little choked up. So that was really amazing. Thank you. Thank you for your insights. I also knew Pearl. I'm surprised we didn't run into each other many years ago. I think just to go back to the two questions, and I don't want to kind of preempt. I never say this because I have this thing about doing history where there's something in dance history where you have to be a dancer in order to do it. And I always say, you know, Erick Foner, the great Civil War historian, never shot a musket. So, you know, I don't feel that you have to dance to write about dance. I did happen to. And I was privileged enough to be in company class with Martha in the 70s. I knew Ethel Winter, and she said that the way she taught contraction was a laugh, ha, or a cry, as you said. But, you know, we're all adults.
She had other metaphors also.
Yeah, and let's get honest, right?
Yeah.
Graham punched people in the stomach when they weren't, and that's for me, that's a major difference. Hawkins starts in the center and Graham starts in the center, and one is very violent. And I don't think we need to know what, I think we can figure it out if one of them punched somebody in the stomach and had to pay that person $60,000 for hurting them. So, there's a lot of drama there in that. But also she once, Lore told a woman to get out of class until she'd had an orgasm. And that is, that is the seed of life. And that is where it came from. And that is contraction and release. That's the way I was taught. And it was brutal and it was gruesome, but and deeply human. So, that is the base. That's my understanding of the base that gives life. And it also goes back to Balanchine. Because if you look at the opening of Apollo, and only the Dance Theater of Harlem does it, and the scene where Lita is giving birth, it's the same, it's contraction. It looks like Graham all over again. It's fascinating, fourth position and all. So it's really fascinating that all of those people who were creating in the 30s were looking at this in very much the same way. The other thing that I argue in the book, which is very much an argument, is that the Germans and the Japanese had the modern dance. And that has been very much written out because of World War II. And there was a political act when Mary Wigman and the Germans and Michio Ito and the Japanese were not free. And when the books on modern dance were being written, the treatises, it was after World War II, and freedom and democracy, and neither the Germans nor the Japanese were democratic and free unless the Americans taught them how, therefore we taught the American dance. But that, if you look back at John Martin and other critics of the time, the leaders in modern dance were the Germans, and the Japanese were training with them. So I think we have to go back to that. Martha Graham was offered a Guggenheim Fellowship in the 1930s to study in Germany, and she said, no, I want to go to the Southwest. Because she said, I'm not making a modern dance, right? I'm making an American dance. And she felt that in order to make the dance, she had to, she said, know the land. Those are her words, know the land. And she felt, and there were these scenes where Martha would arrive in a plane and kiss the ground, and Georgia O'Keeffe would roll her eyes, and so I mean there were all these battles about who knew the land better, right? But I mean, they were divas, they were wonderful. But I think that was the essence, was just like the contraction is grabbing the center of the body. In order to make this new dance, you had to grab the land. Right, you had to walk in it, and that's what. So at any rate, I'm going on too long.
So because I also just want to pull one out of the box. This is the raccoon. So here you're looking at 1978 Hawkins piece. So again, all natural things: wood, horsehair, feathers, leather. And they're just kind of, they're just amazing, amazing pieces, that, and transformative in a way too, when you put them on, really danceable, and you look at the world through this and you start to feel like that animal. I often wonder, I wish I could get a hold of Julie Taymor and just say, had you ever seen this piece? Because there's some essence of it that just starts to feel like Lion King a little bit to me, and it's great. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ari. And thank you for everyone for sharing. Marilyn here also is one of Martha Graham's first scholarship students. And then came to Vegas, produced many shows here, and has wonderful stories about Martha. I only had dinner with Martha once with Henry. And, you know, and sometimes when I worked for Henry, I would type his lectures on Saturday, and she would call him. And that was just a weird thing when someone you're studying in a history book is calling on the phone, and you're hearing them talk about like chocolate mousse and things, like recipes, cooking things. You know, amazing. Oh, well, gosh, I'm hoping. You know, we have a concert at UNLV next week, and it's Student Works. It's fantastic. And I see Hawkins' fingerprints kind of all over their work sometimes. They nod their heads. Yeah, there's movements that they find. There's things, there's ideas that weave their way into it. And Jenna's got a brilliant piece in that concert on Friday. I'm not sure when the next Hawkins piece that we'll do. I keep looking at. Ari just did a brilliant concert with us. Yeah, that just passed. Yeah, the one you missed. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, there's some Hawkins pieces. There's a piece called Summer Clouds People that I would love to pull out of the boxes, and it's got beautiful movement, these tasseling kind of shapes. Makes me excited.
Proper setting.
Yeah, so yeah. Although that was kind of miraculous. You guys.
Very.
Yeah. Dancers are game for anything.
Younger people are.
Yeah, younger people are game for anything too. That's true. That's true. Okay, thank you all so much. Feel free to look. That's why I'm going to take it off. It's it is the antelope.
The antelope, that one is.
We did.